Smitty, how long you been in Grand Haven?
Probably 6 years now.
6 years?
So yeah, I didn't surf like, when we first moved here, but it was mostly...
You were a surfer in Florida and you came up here, and what did you think when people first mentioned that you could surf out here?
I thought they were kind of stupid, honestly. It looked really bad, and I thought, no way they're having fun out there.
Wind in your face, waves crashing on top of you, and freezing cold water. Why would anyone want to surf in the Great Lakes? You're listening to Beyond the Shore from Michigan Public. I'm Rebecca Williams. This is the second of 5 stories about the Great Lakes. 1 story per lake. A snapshot that tells a story about each of the lakes, a sort of microcosm of what makes each lake unique. Chapter 2, Lake Michigan and the surfers who ride its waves.
Surfing anywhere is like dancing with Mother Nature in the most intimate way, right? You have these big, beautiful masses of water that are literally carrying you. And I think it's so elevated here on the Great Lakes because we're surfing fresh water.
Surfing Lake Michigan has always been part of life for Ella Scrocky. She caught her first wave when she was 5. Her family opened a shop, Sleeping Bear Surf and Kayak, in Empire. She's surfed all over, but surfing in a lake, she says, it's definitely different. It's like a gift.
To think that we get such beautiful formations here on a lake that is widely considered as inferior to its ocean counterparts is like unbelievably special, and it almost feels like unreal when you're doing it. So the act of riding a wave just feels like this very incredible spiritual connection. You feel really weightless, and it's like the most present I think that I've ever experienced, for sure.
For this episode, we sent Dustin Dwyer out to talk to Lake Michigan surfers. Hey, Dustin.
Hey.
And Dustin, you did not just talk to surfers, you gave surfing a try yourself.
Yeah, I had to check it out. I mean, for journalistic purposes, one, because, you got a bunch of people saying that surfing is fun. And I had to fact check that, of course. But also, I live here. I live in West Michigan. And this beach, not on days like today, but when it's warm, I spend a lot of time here with my family. And we're always playing in these waves when there are waves. And, if there was just an opportunity to experience Lake Michigan a little bit differently, I wanted to go for it.
Okay, well, we're definitely going to talk about that. But first, let's talk about these waves. We know that Lake Michigan is pretty big, but the first question everybody seems to have about surfing on the Great Lakes is, really? You can surf the Great Lakes? How is that even possible?
Well, you can explain it really in one word: fetch.
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 So what we're looking for is the most amount of fetch possible.
Here's Ella Scrocky explaining it, since she surfed these waves since she was 5. I met her at the beach in Frankfort, Michigan, on a cold and snowy day this past November.
So here at the Frankfort Pier, for instance, we have a couple hundred miles between here and Chicago for wind to push up from the south to drive energy here to the Frankfort Pier. So the stronger, more sustained wind out of the same direction, allowing the most amount of fetch, most distance that the wind can travel across the water. That's the key, the ticket.
Think about the ocean, right? You have a big storm comes along, you have a strong sustained wind which pushes on the water, and on the ocean that can travel for thousands of miles, building up energy the whole way until it finally crashes on the shore. On a lake, you can get the wind, but by the time the wave forms, it crashes and it's done, so it can't get big.
But the Great Lakes have more fetch than small lakes.
Yeah, and that's the whole idea here, especially depending on where you are on the lake. So where Ella and I are talking at that point is at Frankfort, up the coast, and from there it's on the north side of the lake. So what you really want is a wind out of the southwest, where the wind's coming from right now. Up there, that wind is going to have more distance to travel, so more fetch, bigger wave.
So you can get different surfing conditions in different parts of the lake.
Yeah, depending on where you are. And, there's other factors too. There's the air temperature, there's the water temperature, there's the shape of the coast, there's the piers, which a lot of Lake Michigan surfing happens off of piers. And it's not just because it's easy to walk out on the pier and jump in the water. It's also because the waves behave differently around a pier. And surfers like Ella, they've gotten to read those waves really, really well, and which I have to say is much harder than it sounds, as I discovered.
When you gave surfing a try yourself.
Yep.
All right, let's hear about it.
Okay, so it was a different day than today. The first problem was like finding people to go out with, and who would lend me some gear. So, you know, I kind of got that figured out, and we finally talked to a surfer named Mark Hooksema, and we picked a day. He thought the waves were going to be good. It was actually a really nice day. It was sunny. It was warm out here. But we loaded up into Mark's van. We parked right over there, and we were looking out at the pier. And it turned out actually that the waves were not good on that day. But as we're in the van, you know, cozy and warm, we were looking out, and we could see on the pier there's two guys out there trying to surf it. I haven't seen them catch one. They look like they're giving up already.
Are they really?
Well, maybe they're just getting back up.
No, they're walking back out on the rocks.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. A little hardcores. I remember when I was that age and I was just stoked out of my mind and I would just go no matter what. Now I'm like,
Mark grew up in Muskegon and he learned to surf there, or really he learned to surf watching VHS tapes of surfers. After that, he moved to California. He worked at a surfing magazine for a while, and he tapped into the larger surfing community. And it taught him the difference, what makes Lake Michigan surfing special.
when you get great waves here, you so much appreciate it. You know, surfing in California, you get a great day every, day or two a week. You get a good day. A couple days a month, you get a great day.
Lake Michigan surfing is surfing crappy waves every day so that you can enjoy the good wave that you get once a year.
That's pretty much it. Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of surfing that crappy day, we get out of the van. Those two guys we'd seen jumping off the pier, they're out at this point, so we go talk to them.
My lips are kind of cold right now. It's hard to talk,
How long were you out there?
Oh, probably only like an hour.
This is Jack Bays, 19 years old. He goes by Smitty with the other surfers. We heard him at the beginning. He learned to surf in Florida. Now he lives in Grand Haven. Smitty, how long you been in Grand Haven?
Probably 6 years now.
6 years?
So yeah, I didn't surf when we first moved here, but it was mostly.
You were a surfer in Florida and you came up here, and what did you think when people first mentioned that you could surf out here?
I thought they were kind of stupid, honestly. It looked really bad, and I thought, no way they're having fun out there.
His friend, the other guy in the water, is Jack Ellis, and it was his first time surfing. Did you actually catch any?
I was able to get up and body surf one, but I wasn't able to stand up. The current is way gnarlier than I would have expected. My arms were cooked in 20 minutes. I was way out of breath and just smoked.
My expectations at this point are getting even lower. But there was one more person I had to meet before going in the water, Ken Smith. He owns a surfboard repair shop in Grand Rapids called No Coast Surf, and he said he had a board I could borrow. He's originally from South Africa, but out of all the people I met, he was the one who everyone said would surf even the crappiest of days.
My basic theory is you can only get better at what you do by doing the worst. And so by surfing junky, what we call pile day, it just improves you for when there's good surf out there, and you know the conditions, you know the sandbars, you know where to sit.
So I've got my wetsuit, I have a board. Mark and Ken are going to go out at the same time. I'm ready, I think. Jody hands me a GoPro to strap onto my chest. I grab Ken's board, and I'm in the water. There's a shock at first when the cold water hits the wetsuit. The water's about 40 degrees. But within a couple minutes, the wetsuit does its job and I'm warm. I walk out from the beach and start looking for a wave. And at this point, there's probably a few things I should say about this. First, Lake Michigan can be a dangerous place. Every year, people drown out here. And one reason is because people sometimes underestimate how strong the currents can be and how big the waves. For me, I've spent a lot of time on this lake. I've swam in this exact spot. I also spent part of my childhood living near the ocean where I swam lots. I've surfed before in bigger waves than this. And I went out with two people who know how to surf. I never went near the pier because I didn't want to get thrown against it. And because it was my first time, I also never swam out past where I could stand up. And for an hour out there, standing up is actually what I did the most. Just standing there, watching the whitecaps, trying to decide if I should push the board into any of these little waves by the shore. I tried to catch a few waves. Mark and Ken tried to give me advice. And a couple times I get the timing right and the wave catches the board. And I try to stand up and immediately fall over. After a bit of this, I walked back to the beach and I caught up with Jody, who checked the camera.
Around out there. I don't know, looks like you're having fun. It's very fun, I'm having fun. Good. I'm not surfing, but I'm having fun.
I go back out and I keep trying and I keep failing. Eventually, after about an hour, my feet got cold, and that's pretty much when I called it quits.
Well, Dustin, you survived at least.
Yeah, I lived to tell the tale, but I was freezing, almost as cold as I am today. And getting out was harder than the actual surfing itself, because by then you're cold and you have this thick wetsuit on and you've got to peel it off. And I actually had to find someone to help me peel it off, and I couldn't feel my toes. And I had saved my warm socks for the car ride home, but it was a long time before I could feel my feet again.
Do you think you're ever going to do that again?
I mean, yeah. First off, I didn't actually surf, so I'd like to say that I actually stood up on a surfboard. But, I've got to find the people again. I got to get the gear again. I got to find a day when there's actually good waves out here, which is not today, clearly. Maybe when it's a little warmer, I'll try it again, I hope.
How often are the waves good? We know that the lakes are warming because of climate change. Does that affect how big the waves get?
Okay, so that is actually a really good question, and I looked into it, and when I asked Ella Scrocky, who, she's surfed her whole life, she's out there most days when it's warm giving surfing lessons, I figured the lakes are getting warmer, not today, but the lakes are getting warmer, storms, it seems like, are getting stormier, so that seems like probably you're looking at bigger waves. But when I asked Ella Scrocky, she was like, no, she thinks it's actually been the opposite.
We've had a pretty wide decrease in the amount of surfable days here on the lakes. And water temperature in the summer has actually increased, but we're getting, I think, different wind patterns. It's so hard for me to answer this question because I've seen the changes, but I don't really understand why or how.
Now, Ella knows the lake as well as anyone, but she is not a scientist, so I called up a scientist.
Can you hear me, Dustin?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Right.
This is Kerry Troy. He's in the engineering department at Purdue University.
My research focuses on the physical processes of Lake Michigan, so I look at the waves, the currents, the temperatures, how stuff moves around the lake.
A couple of years ago, one of his students, Nicholas Olson, did a dissertation on this exact topic, whether waves in Lake Michigan are getting bigger or smaller over time.
We threw a lot of different statistical tests at the wave time series that we were able to generate, and we could not, see a definitive increase or decrease in the wave.
Then why would a surfer like Ella Scrocky have fewer surfable days?
We don't know. And one thing that Kerry says to keep in mind is that, his study was measuring waves from buoys out in the middle of Lake Michigan. Ella is experiencing waves on the beach when they're crashing on the shore, and there could be things about, the shape of the coast or the way the sand has moved around underneath the waves that could be affecting that. And also, he said there was only 2 buoys in his study. That's where they had the data for. And, because we know conditions can be different at different parts of the lake, you might, if there could be a study that looks at many different places of the lake, you might get a different result. What he does know, and what we all know, is that climate change is happening. We are seeing warmer lakes. But what scientists are still trying to figure out is what that means for all different types of things that are happening in the lakes. And we don't have a clear answer right now for waves themselves, whether they're getting bigger or not.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think it's a dead end. I think it's still a very interesting question that should be pursued.
And, either way, you have this community of surfers out there catching the waves that they can. And when Ella Scrocky thinks about it, she's not thinking about, the data points. She's not thinking about the buoys or the statistical analysis. She's thinking about this community of surfers. And she's thinking about, honestly, her mom, Beryl, who was the founder of Sleeping Bear Surf and Kayak, was a pillar in the surfing community up there. She's a legend, really. And she passed away a few years ago.
And she was also so in love with this lake. She was an environmental advocate. And I think her legacy is so rooted in joy, and it's rooted in stewardship and this idea of passing forward what you love in hopes that they might love the beautiful gift that is Lake Michigan and the Great Lakes.
And that's what surfing is for her, a way to experience the gift that is Lake Michigan, even when it feels terrible out here.
I think probably my favorite days surfing here on the Great Lakes are right in June, when we get our first swell of the season. And everyone comes out here to the Frankfurt Pier. There's kiteboarders, there's foilers, there's paddleboarders, there's surfers, boogie boarders. And everyone's like, this is the best ever. And you look at the water and it's knee-high wind chop. But everyone's just excited for this opportunity to play. And I think that's what's just really special about this culture of freshwater adventure here.
Excited for the opportunity to play.
Yeah, and I feel like that's probably the part that I wasn't fully getting when I first started the story, is the surfers out here, no one's out here thinking this is the greatest wave on the planet. They're not surfing barrels in Hawaii or anything like that. It's just that it's such a gift to even be able to surf out here that, if you get that opportunity, no matter if the waves are terrible, no matter if you're freezing cold like I am now, no matter if you're like me and you can't even stand up on the board, if you have the chance, you take it.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thank you. We gotta go warm up now.
Next time on Beyond the Shore, Michigan Public's Kate Furby takes us out on a frozen lake to follow the story of an ancient fish.
Did you say that not to put our seatbelts on? Is that in case we fall through the ice?
That is in case the truck for some silly reason goes through. That should not be the case today. We're cutting 24 to 26 inches of ice, but pressure cracks do open up, silly things do happen.
Very low percentage.
Very low percentage, but in case that does happen.
Still not zero.
An adventure to understand the Midwestern love for the dinosaur sturgeon. Dustin Dwyer reported and produced this episode, with editing from me, Vincent Duffy, and Jody Westrick. Special thanks to Randy Kest and Mike King. Support for the production of this podcast was made possible by the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation as part of its Great Lakes News Collaborative. Music by Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Rebecca Williams. Beyond the Shore is a production of Michigan Public. You can find all of our podcasts at michiganpublic.org/podcasts.